And then, you know, we got a giant paperback deal on the 13th Juror.
I remember.
That changed life.
It was did Fine publish the hardcover?
Yeah, Fine did the hardcover, but we had a war. We really had a war. Legal stuff and faxes back and forth every day, and you know, I tried to get him to exercise his option on the book, and I tried to I turned down his offer on the book.
Mm-hmm.
And we fought for a long time. I spent $28,000 in legal fees.
Wow.
But it was worthwhile. But I didn't, you know, it was a year I made $20,000, so it was pretty tough. So we were out there on that old proverbial limb, you know, and now I look back and go, wow, you know, why didn't I have more courage or whatever it was? But you know, you didn't know. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I hadn't had the kind of acclaim my books have been fortunate enough to get.
Well, that was the book that really, I think, sparked it off. I think you're right when you say that while they were good books, that there was nothing really strikingly original about that Irish or the Vig. I mean, I remember when they came in. I remember when they published, and I remember selling them. You know, writing them up and selling them. But there wasn't anything, especially, you know, I mean, notable.
My feelings aren't hurt. I mean, I was trying to figure out the form and what I wanted to do and the characters and all that stuff, and that's why I think I dropped it. You know, beyond even the whole, you know, I didn't know I was going to get sick and make these kind of adjustments. But at the time, I said, you know, I don't want to do another book like these two. I mean, I'm past that. I said, now I'm going to write a real novel. I was even surprised that the real novel took the form of kind of having a mystery element, to tell you the truth, because I would have said I would have gone more the Michael Chabon way and tried to write a mainstream book.
Well, but they're mainstream issues in 13th Juror. I mean,
well, that's what I've gotten to with these books now. I don't apologize to them at all. I think I'm writing mainstream fiction, and you know, I just have to. I happen to have a plot that makes you want to turn the pages. I mean,
I mean, I think of them as crime. Now, see, I redefined my definition a long time ago. I mean, we're called theoretically, legally, actually, a mystery bookstore, but I don't think that you can really use that term anymore. I call it crime novel in the same way that Dostoevsky or Victor Hugo or something. You know, it's a
well, good. Crime. You and I are in accord.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
and certainly, I think the first law, you know, is in no way. I mean, you open the book and your guys, you know, are suiting up. Moses and Diz are suiting up in Kevlar, and you know, getting ready to ride down to the corral, so to speak. I was just in Tombstone last week, and
I mean, Tombstone plays such a huge role in this book. I mean, you know, the ghost of John Holliday hovers on every page. I think, you know.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, it was clear. There's a signal right there at the outset that, you know, this is going to be yet a different book. But the 13th Juror, I think, sent that same. I mean, in a way, it was almost like a classic PI opener, you know, and Hardy's there, and then this client, that's the, you know, the client comes in the door and brings the case. And, and that's sort of the way you kick off. I mean, Bob Parker's been having a lot of fun sort of doing that with the Spencers lately. In fact, his new one that's coming out, Backstory. In March, his adopted son, Paul, comes back with a client for Spencer. And they do this kind of typically, you know, PI opening thing, but it turns out that the fee that they've hauled along is a box of Krispy Kremes. I love it.
That's very good.
And Spencer's doing this kind of pro bono thing, you know, because he's flush and they aren't. But he's done that a whole lot of times, and I think it's sort of easy to forget at the moment that that really was the classic. If you go back to Ross McDonald, Raymond Chandler, whatever, you know, the PI was just kind of in the office.
Yeah, right. Hanging out with the mall, you know, the mall girlfriend.
Bottle in the, you know, bottle in the drawer, and you know, feet on the desk, and the whole just sort of waiting for something to happen, and then, you know, door opens, and then there's somebody, oftentimes with luck, a blonde, but could be anything. And we're just publishing a book by Joanne Dobson, which is a wonderful riff on the hardboiled genre called The Maltese Manuscript. And the whole thing, I mean, it's hilarious. It's
a great title.
It is. And I love the book because it has the body in the library, but but anyway, the person who comes to the door in Joanne's book is this female. It's a Patricia Cornwell clone, is what it really is. Leather jacket, you know, comes in the door and brings trouble.
Right.
And troubles the dog. I love it. I mean, we had a chance to do a lot of fun stuff with Trouble, you know, who rears up and, you know, all these kinds of things. But the point is, it's still, you know, if you really want to do even a sort of send-up or tongue-in-cheek, hard-boiled, whatever, you still have the English professor in the office, and the door opens, and the hard-boiled private eye writer and Trouble walk in. So I remember the 13th juror that does this, you know, more or less in the office, and this case comes to him.
Yeah, he just gets, you know, he's sitting, actually, I think he spent 43 days in the office and nothing's happened, basically, for 43 days. And he's thinking, man, I got to get out of here. And his secretary or the receptionist walks up and she goes, we just got a call and this woman has been arrested for murder and it's got to go to David and he's not here. You've got to go take the case, you know. And he just goes down and it's like, you know, it just starts, you know. But it was a cool beginning. I thought it was pretty fun.
It was. No, it really was. And it was sort of an interesting segue from the PI, you know.
Well, also from the old bartender that you'd known in the VIG. The guy had been through so many changes, you know.
Right.
And suddenly now he's this family man. He's got young children. He's got this wife. He's got all of these issues. And he's, you know, he's involved in life, you know, which is, I think, what makes him attractive now is that he's so, you know, involved in life. You know.
And you really dig into some tough issues. I mean, you know, the mercy rule.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is you know, and you almost like to, well, you do like to paint your people into corners and then see if there's any way they can get out.
It is a flaw, yes. I
well,
know.
no, it's not a flaw. It's what makes it fun. But I think you don't flinch from difficult issues. What
no,
do you do about
actually,
terminal illness?
I seek them out. I seek them out.
Yeah.
These difficult issues. I mean, that's what I think drives me to write these plots. I mean, when I you know, whether it's a personal issue like in the hearing with Klitsky and all of his stuff, or like these two books, The Mercy Rule and 13th Juror, I think that what I'm trying to do and what makes this interesting to me is I don't want to write a simple mystery. I don't want to write a puzzle, really. I just want to write a story that kind of reflects what's going on in the world, you know, a real story. And then if you don't address the real issues out there, it seems to me I mean, it's not as interesting.
Well, I think that's true. But if you don't have conflict and danger,
gotta have conflict.
Then you don't have any real tension in the book. So you've got people who are sort of in extremis, either medically or whatever. In fact, in first law, you know, what do you do when the system is corrupt is basically your question here. You know, if the cops have gone bad, what can you do?
What can you do?
Which I suppose is your justification for the shootout back at the corral. But I was also thinking about, you know, the structure. A PI novel is, you know, it's a fairly classic structure.
Sure.
It's an investigation and starts at point A with a person coming in the door and
right.
plods along here until we get to the end. A courtroom thriller, I don't think people often think about the structure of a courtroom thriller, but a courtroom thriller in its own way is almost like a country house murder.
Well, the other thing that's to me, but the other thing about it, and I was just, I don't know why, I very rarely think about these kind of things rationally. I just kind of like intuit them. But last night I was thinking, I was in Sarasota, Florida, and I was, for some reason, we had been talking about mysteries at dinner, and I said to myself, I said, you know, I think the difference between a mystery and a courtroom drama, if there is one, is that really there's both sides.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not just an investigator trying to get at the truth. There's the whole other vision of the truth. That's the prosecutor. Well, you know, if you got a defense guy, but a prosecutor's guy. If you tell a story right, you've got a mystery looked at from both sides, which is really a different way to look at it. I mean, it's a very, you know, it's not the same animal as a you know, a PI novel.
Well, but if you go back and look at the origins of trial, and if you go back to Shakespeare and look at Richard II, I think it is, you know, people used to hire champions to battle, and the guy, I mean, there were various tests when you were accused of a crime, one of which was, you know, the hot iron on the tongue thing, and
I hate that one.
Well, it's terrible, But then
the ducking stool is a lot of fun.
That was another one. If she drowned, you know, or if she
if she drowned, she's guilty.
And if she survived, she was also guilty, and then we kill her another way. But anyway, you know, people hired champions who actually rode at each other in a joust and all, and that's really all that lawyers and courtroom things are about. Is that, you know, you've got the prosecution, you've got the defense, but it's actually like the White Knight
and the Black Knight.
Writing out. But when I said country house murder, what I did mean is that you do have a circumscribed environment. I think Earl Stanley Gardner did that especially well, though anyone who knows anything about law knows that there's no way that Perry Mason actually found the guilty party through interrogation in the courtroom. It's irrelevant. They worked. They were fun